Well met, and welcome to Week 12 of the Hearthstone Global Games. My name is Robert Wing, back from my little gallivant over in Poland, back in the North America studio with my good friend and favorite, this is to you, Daniel Falcone, co-caster, Cora. Cora, how you doing?
That statement makes the fact that I was in Jersey last week so much better.
You can't say that. There are people from Jersey watching.
I'm sure there are. The rest of your state seemed lovely.
Sure.
But, you know, with the part where I was, it was a little hectic. There was a lot going on there, and it wasn't Poland, let's just say that. Poland sounds lovely. But I would go back to Jersey, maybe just not to cast a Hearthstone tournament. Who knows?
Well, I'm pretty sure you're going to get angry letters all the same for that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So,
I was trying to save that. I don't think there was a way to save it.
Probably not. Let's go ahead and just cut away and look at the Hearthstone Global Games format. We're currently knee-deep in Stage 2. That's 6 groups of 4 teams participating in a 3-week round robin. Up next, though, on the docket is going to be Stage 3, a 16-team single elimination with the top 4 teams advancing to a live LAN final taking place later this year. So things have really been heating up now. We're 12 weeks in, but it's kind of coming down to these final few weeks to decide who's going to be making it to that all-important live LAN finals.
A lot on the line. These teams have battled so far to get here, and now we can see our standings for the groups thus far. There have been a couple of upsets, not necessarily in Group A, but we did see the United States versus Czech Republic earlier this week, and the United States did, in fact, fall to the Czech Republic. So that was maybe a little bit of an upset.
Right, and if you're watching at home and you see your team not in those top 2 spots, just remember there are 16 teams advancing, so 4 of the third-place teams are going to be advancing based on game record. Still some daylight for some of these teams, but look, it's a 3-week portion of the tournament. This is very short. Every single game, not even match, every single game matters. So a lot of these teams are going to be looking to try to pull themselves up with the 3 and 4 spot. And we have 2 games tonight, though, I'm very excited for. Back in the Europe broadcast, I didn't get a chance to see my friends in Latin America as much, but we're here back and we get to see 2 of the front runners from that group of countries, Argentina and Brazil. First up, it is going to be Argentina taking on the Philippines, and then we end the night with Brazil versus New Zealand.
I'm going to try not to alienate any countries like I did any people from New Jersey already during this broadcast. So we've seen some fantastic things from both the Latin American, South American region and Southeast Asia. Philippines in particular, I don't think a lot of people expected to make it quite this far. Argentina has some popular names and popular faces, but even still, South America being on the brink and on the rise in the Hearthstone scene is a relatively new thing. So from Argentina, we do have PNC and Snail, who are both HCT veterans, as well as Nalgidon, who is a fantastic Argentinian Hearthstone streamer, and then Ildami, who is a great player as well, just maybe one of the lesser knowns on the team.
Sure, and representing the Philippines, we have Waning Moon, Karakute, Chalk, and Stas, and you know, these are all names that I think diehard Hearthstone esports fans are going to recognize, but they haven't necessarily had any major global success, with the exception of Stas, who Stas, I think, actually, low-key, has the most prize winnings of any Hearthstone player in the world. So Stas certainly has a lot of success, but, you know, to your point, what was the expectation for the Philippines coming in? They did make it to Stage 2, but they were actually tied for the worst record in terms of game score and then match score. They came in to Stage 2 with a 2-3 record and then a 10-10 game or 10-10 game record. So 50% win rate versus the Netherlands, which they went up against last week, who was rocking something like a 73% win rate. So Philippines, you know, they made it to Stage 2. They deserve to be proud of that. But, you know, it's clear for them that they're going to kind of have to tighten up the gameplay here and get some work done if they are going to hope to advance to Stage 3.
I mean, they certainly want to. They did sort of just slide right into Stage 2, but if they can pick up a couple more wins in their group, then they do still have a chance of moving on to Stage 3. So not all is lost yet for the Philippines, even though there weren't maybe very high expectations for them going into the start of this tournament. They've been playing for 12 weeks, and they're at this point just the same as any of the other Titans.
Well, we see up here on the screen all the classes the players brought. The players will be competing with the Hearthstone Global Games format. Format obviously unique to this tournament, hence the namesake. If you haven't had a chance to watch up until this point, let Cora go ahead and just break it down for you.
Absolutely, Rob. So, 4 players per team. There are obviously 9 classes in the game. Even though we don't see Warlock too often, it is still going to be represented. Each of the 4 players will take 2 individual unique classes. Then it plays out like a best-of-5 blind pick, a conquest match normally would. And if we get to game number 5, one of the previous players will come in as the ace. They then have the choice of playing either the class they did not choose previously or that 9th class.
Yeah, great summary there. Again, if you are the ace player for your team, it's because your team trusts you to be that person who is at least at the wheel, using the keyboard and mouse there to make the decision.
The proverbial
Even
wheel.
though this is obviously game by committee, so it's still important if you are trusted to have the mouse there, because you could just do whatever you want. Go rogue.
I mean, and a lot of these matches do go down to game number 5, so it is a very important position to have. And there's been, since the global games have been going on, a lot of really unique differences between the way that teams are formatting their lineups, what classes they're putting with what, and what classes they're leaving for that ace spot. So I'm always really interested to see exactly what we're working with if we get down to game number 5.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the first picks up on deck here. We have Nalbidon on Mage, taking on Chalk on the Paladin. And both of these classes, I think more so than some of the other classes, have had a consistent foothold in the Journey to Un'Goro meta. I think it's kind of at the point now, at least on ladder, where it's safe to say that this is just kind of a Mage's game, and we just live in it.
It's a brutal, frosty world indeed. But Mage and Paladin are two of the classes from Journey to Un'Goro that I think stand out the most because how they've evolved over time and really all of the viable archetypes that exist within these two classes. So it's almost impossible to speculate what we're going to actually be seeing in this match because there's just so much that you can really do within both of these classes. And it's really refreshing that even though we just found out we're going to be getting the announcement for the new expansion very shortly, that there's still so much movement happening within this meta.
Yeah, certainly this set has had more opportunities for players to kind of innovate and find different things. We say all the time, like, well, okay, we haven't seen anything major come out just recently. There's probably kind of the end of innovation, but I was seeing just recently, right? Surrender's Mage list with the Arcane Giants, the aggressive secret package. So there's just all kinds of room still to innovate, and this has been a great set for it. But do want to highlight on what you said. July 6th, the announcement was made today. Go ahead and watch. There's going to be details on the next expansion coming out for Hearthstone. So very exciting times. Going into this one, as you said, both classes can be played a bunch of different ways. In general, though, I want to point out the Burn Mage list that we've seen kind of all over the place lately, especially on ladder, has actually done a pretty decent job of kind of chasing off the more balanced mid-range Paladin because it does such a good job of dealing with that early board. And then if it goes late, it's just Alexstrasza, Pyroblast, Primordial Glyph, giving you so much flexibility. So I have to think Mage is certainly the deck I'm watching for here, but obviously Paladin can adapt to that style of build with more of a healing package, more of an aggressive style.
More controlling Paladin decks do have the option of running cards like Forbidden Healing and Lay on Hands, which is really the only way that you're going to counteract all of the burn in the late game from the Mage. With any other deck that doesn't have enormous amounts of healing, you're going to run into a significant amount of trouble there. But the Mage in the early game does have tools like Frostbolt. Volcanic Potion is very key against early Murloc synergy from a mid-range Paladin build. So there's a lot that the Mage can do to counteract what the Paladin has to bring to the table, unless it is more of a heavy controlling, maybe a N'Zoth variant of the Paladin.
Very curious to see what Argentina will do. If you watched their match last week, I believe it was against South Korea. They brought out kind of some interesting check choices in some of their deck. I want to say in the Paladin, we actually saw, Vine Cleaver come out, which isn't necessarily all over the place. Vine Cleaver is super powerful. We saw a Priest deck that was a little bit more unusual. We saw, it kind of looked like the Miracle Priest at first, but then we saw Holy Nova in there. I did speak to Pansay today, and he was telling me that with his schedule just recently, Copa America, DreamHack Summer, he's been kind of all over the place. So while in Stage 1, he was kind of doing the legwork in terms of building the decks and kind of saying who was playing what, he's actually taken more of a hands-off approach and is allowing the team to, actually build their own stuff, which certainly speaks to Pansay's confidence in his teammates. But it also means that, each player in Hearthstone kind of has their own unique approach to, well, this is the tech card choice I want to run. Like, this is what I'm targeting. So I'm actually really excited to see what Argentina does this week, if they tend to go back to the norm or if they're going to continue to live out on the edge a little bit.
I like that, though. I think that certainly speaks to maybe how they're working together as a team now more efficiently than they did at the start, because it's been 12 weeks since these guys started playing. I'm sure they've gotten to know each other a lot better. They've gotten to know each other's play styles, and the fact that Pansay is trusting them more now, I think that's really fantastic. I like to see individual players with their own specialties bringing their own flair in their decks.
Yeah, some players actually do bring flair now. That's worth pointing out. Yeah.
That's a card.
Hunter now running it. Obviously, guys, we're just waiting on the Philippines to get into the game, and then we'll go ahead and start up from there. But speaking of the Philippines, they also are coming from a point where, as we said, their performance in Stage 1 was anything short of convincing. Right, they managed to kind of hobble into Stage 2, but they understood that coming into it, they were going to have the opportunity to fresh start and kind of a clean slate. And what we saw from the Netherlands last week, nothing, as Falcone and I were casting that match, nothing really stood out as being weak play from the Philippines. They were just playing against the Netherlands, and the Netherlands are a group of really crafty, high IQ players that don't tend to make mistakes. So there's really very little for the Philippines to kind of punish there.
Yeah.
And they needed to bring their own strong plays. Didn't necessarily get it done. It was a 1-3 in favor of the Netherlands, but still room for the Philippines there to get a win. And if they can get a win right now, then their position in the group just looks so much better.
We have been seeing some good things from the Philippines throughout. Obviously, they did make it to this point. It was a little bit shaky, and they did sort of just make it to this point.
Right.
But they did have some interesting decks, some really nice play. A couple of the Paladins that we did actually see from the Philippines came from Karakute, and they were very solid, controlling N'Zoth builds. So very greedy style of Paladin. I'm wondering if they'll be bringing something similar today, even though it is a different player playing the Paladin. That'll certainly speak to their teamwork, I think, if they are deciding that maybe the decks that they brought in the first stage of the tournament were good enough to get them here, but were they good enough to get them through to the next stage?
Yeah, it's certainly in a 3-week portion of a tournament where every single game matters. You have to think that it's not necessarily as it was in stage 1, where, okay, you lose a week, you kind of think like, okay, what went wrong? What can we maybe fix? I think after you lose in that first week of stage 2, you actually just really, you bring everybody into a call. You say, guys, what went wrong? How do we fix this? Is it the deck list? Is it the calls we're making? You're watching the VODs. You're doing a lot of scouting on your opponents as well. And if you're scouting Argentina, Argentina has flashes of really, really tight play. And then occasionally, as a team, I think they get a little bit creative, and it doesn't necessarily always pan out, but they it's Hearthstone, right? So generally speaking, there's an optimal play, but you can see kind of what the players favor as a style, whereas I was talking about Netherlands is a little more cautious. They're a little bit more greedy and conservative in how they play. Argentina sometimes extends out just a little bit, so I would like to see if the Philippines can maybe find a way to turn that on them, but obviously it is going to depend on the matchups. We see there Nalgudan getting ready for this game. He is on voice comms with the rest of the Argentinian squad. Pansay said they've all gotten a lot closer over the course of this tournament. Said that not just them, but also the LATAM countries in general, which traditionally actually have some rivalries through soccer and other traditional sports. They've really come together in the Hearthstone Global Games.
And what was it? Did 4 of the 5 South American countries make it through stage 1 to stage 2? That is a massive percentage, and especially with Mexico now being up 2-0. We're going to see Brazil play later today. The South American countries are coming in and representing very, very well. Stronger than I think most people expected, but certainly on point with how they've been performing previously in the Hearthstone Championship Tour tournaments. South America has been on the uprise, I think, on the up and up for quite a while now, and they just really haven't had that breakout performance yet. This very well could be it. I think Argentina, Brazil, and then you've got Mexico and Peru as well, are fantastic representatives of what South America can actually do.
Yeah, totally agree. Just an update from production, guys. We are currently waiting on one player from the Philippines to actually show up at their computer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. To that point, I think I would kind of contest a little bit of what you're saying in that I think South America in general is always very consistent in what we see in the Hearthstone Championship Tour, right? We've seen players, there's always an offering or two from South America to actually come to the Hearthstone Championship Tour championships. We're actually saying, I want to say, in
Diego
Shanghai.
Diaz.
Yep, Diego Diaz. So that's actually just a model of consistency in terms of how this goes. I think the Hearthstone Global Games, what's different now is we're having a chance to more regularly see their play and more the evolution of these teams. Brazil is a great example of a team that really started out different, that has kind of brought their play in together. They've stopped using kind of the deck list they thought might be fun, and they've really refined their play. But I want to say we have the players, so I think we should be getting into this one pretty soon. Very excited to see what the Philippines can do tonight. If they lose, they go down 0-2. Both of these teams, again, taking losses in week 1 of stage 2.
A lot riding on this match for both of these teams, but game number 1 is going to be, of course, the Mage for Nalgudan and Argentina, and the Paladin for Chalk and the Philippines.
All right, so Chalk, I want to say back in the day was on Team Fade to Carba.
I believe he was, yes.
Memory serves, yeah. He's someone who has a lot of experience playing competitively, but certainly one of those players who's fortunate enough to be a member of a team where he can kind of leverage the combined competitive experience there. We see now the Galaka Crawler in the Philippines opening hand, so certainly looking for a very specific matchup with that card right there. That's not a card you just run as a 2-mana 2/3. Nalgudan, though, has an opening hand that, it kind of writes itself. It just gets right down to business.
To defeat the Paladins.
Yeah.
Well, it does seem to be a more standard Discover Mage variant that is going to have the burn package, early removal with Volcanic Potion, Medivh's Valet, and then the Medivh the Guardian to sort of build up that one final board state if the burn plan fails. And we are going to have a more controlling variant of Paladin from the Philippines. So if there is significant healing in this Paladin deck, Argentina could have a tough time with the traditional Alexstrasza on 9, double Fireball Frostbolt on 10 strategy.
Certainly, we see Volcanic Potion in the opening hand for Argentina, and Volcanic Potion has a lot of very favorable meta matchups. It goes well into Aggro Druid, it goes well into Bloodlust Token Shaman, but this style of Paladin is not necessarily going to get a ton of excellent purchase, because this style of Paladin just wants to wait, just wants to grind you out, just wants to get to that end game, that healing, and then just kind of go from there. So Volcanic Potion might see play, but this isn't necessarily what it is there for. Argentina has options if they want to go ahead and really just commit to getting rid of the Galaka Crawler. Could have used Primordial Glyph, saw what came off of that. They had the coin, could have bumped that Mana Worm up to 3 attack. Go ahead and choose not to, though. And I think it's fair to assume the Paladin is probably not going to have a way to do 1 damage and really punish this too heavily.
In theory, Argentina could have had the Primordial Glyph Infinite Lethal there with the Mana Worm, but probably right that they did not go for it, as I don't think it has ever been done, and very well may never.
I've gotten to 7 straight Primordial Glyphs, but that's as high as I've ever gotten. And it was to the point where I'm just sitting there doing it, and I had better options, but I just wanted to see
how far can we actually make this go. Yeah, it's difficult for the Paladin to deal 1 damage. You do have the option of Wild Pyromancer plus a Secret on turn 3, but no Paladin decks are running any natural copies of Secrets. That's what Hydrologist is for, and then the solid removal comes on turn 4 in the form of True Silver Champion. So safe bet that the Mana Worm is going to live, and you will get something done with it going forward.
Wow, these are just some truly egregious choices for the Paladin. Paladin has what I would consider pretty much inarguably the best tools when it comes to Stonehill Defender. A lot of their best cards are legendaries with Taunt, so certainly would have liked to see those. Instead, just go ahead and take the Fen Creeper. Realize on curve, Fen Creeper could actually be pretty strong here. It was the most overall powerful option in terms of what they had to offer, so
definitely unfortunate, seeing as Paladin does have 3 Taunt class legendaries, and class cards obviously are more likely to show up in Discover choices than simply neutral cards. So a bit unfortunate there that the Philippines wasn't offered any of those, because they could potentially have swayed this game in the later stages. Whereas a Fen Creeper, yes, you can play on curve, but it doesn't affect the game quite as strongly as a Sunkeeper Tarim would have.
All right, so the Stonehill Defender came down after the Galaka Crawler did the trade into the Mana Worm, or not the trade, rather bumped into it. So the Stonehill Defender is actually just an incredibly powerful block there for that Mana Worm. Yeah, it's going to go ahead and just eat the Mana Worm body, put a little bit of damage onto the Arcanologist. So the Galaka Crawler, even though it's not hitting a pirate there, just the fact that it was essentially a River Crocolisk on 2 was actually really powerful, because Nalgudon never got the Frostbolt, which, when you have that Frostbolt off the Mana Worm, it's an incredibly powerful early curve of just keeping their board clear, pushing pressure. Yeah, so actually the Paladin now, which can suffer a little bit from a strong start from a Mage, has equalized out pretty decently.
It is rare that this Paladin gains initiative early on in the game, because the Mage, while it doesn't have much in the form of mid-range minions, does have a fair bit of early game, which we have seen quite a bit of. So the fact that the Paladin is going to be able to neutralize this board state and then start developing their own means that they can play a little bit proactively, which is, again, kind of unusual for this Paladin, because it is a very reactive deck by nature. You want to neutralize your opponent's board states with Pyro Equality, with Sunkeeper Tarim, and then you want to grind them out in the late game. So if you can get that little bit of proactive board state early on, you can prevent any of the minion chip damage from the Mage, and then really make it so that the burn plan doesn't exist.
All right, we saw Philippines there just go ahead and deal with the damaged Arcanologist. Now, I do want to point out, obviously that is a fairly straightforward play in terms of what they did. They did have the opportunity to test if maybe there was an ice barrier up, or test for something else. Now, Potion of Polymorph, there was like a week where Potion of Polymorph was in regular circulation of Mage decks. Mirror Entity there as well. They didn't test for there, and Wicker Flame Burn Bristle certainly could have been something they did not want to give their opponents, but felt confident that they had the line on what that secret was, that it was not something that would have punished them.
Yeah, block barrier are going to be your most common mage secrets in traditional Discover style builds. And then, of course, you do have your fringe, more aggressive secret builds, which you do see Counterspell and Mirror Entity run in. And in some cases, those builds also can have barrier and block as well. But usually, you know what to expect by this point if you haven't seen, Cabal Lackey or any of the other secret cards.
Yeah, Fen Creeper just a big wall right now, and Nalgwedon goes ahead and decides to pop the Primordial Glyph, sees what he can find. Now, Polymorph would allow him to get through, so that's certainly something to be considered of. But Cabalist Tome might be something he's thinking over there because he figures, okay, this is a slower style of Paladin from what I can see thus far. I want to make sure that I have resources. Now, that said, Cabalist Tome is kind of a gamble, so we'll have to see what he actually gets here.
He's going to go for the value. Polymorph could have been guaranteed use against a Tyrion later on as well.
On 9 cards right now, so he doesn't have to discard the coin. Want to go ahead and call it the Harrison Jones now, coming into hand for the Philippines. Nalgwedon looking at this match is probably thinking, okay, my turn 8 is pretty much locked up, or even my turn 7. Like, I probably just want to develop the Medivh and the Atiyesh. The Blizzards, while not great in this particular matchup, are kind of mid-range expensive spells, so they synergize pretty well with the Atiyesh, but that Harrison is going to do work for the Philippines.
You absolutely need weapon removal if you're playing in a meta where Mage is popular.
Which feels weird to say.
Yes.
Right? Pre One Night in Karazhan.
Bizarre. Because even pre-Ungoro, Medivh wasn't played nearly at all until this Mage build decided to come along and make it work. So now you see far more Gluttonous Ooze and Harrison Jones running around in Warriors, in Paladins, in the occasional Shaman list because you are so worried about that large board state that Mage can build, of all things, in the late game.
So Philippines went ahead and just tempoed out the Wild Pyromancer. I'm trying to think I think from what they've seen thus far, there is no clear indicator as to what style of Mage deck this is, which feels weird to say because the Mage has already gone through 5 turns.
Yeah.
But because of how flexible it is, it's difficult to tell. What they've seen thus far tells them that this could be a Freeze Mage, it could be the Burn Mage, maybe for like the old style of Gunther Mage, which feels weird to say old style.
Yeah.
You would have expected to see the Cabal Courier by now, something there that would kind of give it away, but yeah, they went ahead and just played out the Pyromancer to put out more pressure, and the Blizzards off the Cabalist Tome there are at least going to get a little bit more value than you probably expected them to get.
Any value that you can get off of generated spells here is good enough, right? Because Polymorph was a guarantee. You took a little bit of a risk by going with the Cabalist Tome. So the fact that that did pay off means that you're going to be able to extend the amount of time that you can fight against the Paladin in the late game. But even just looking at differential between hand value right now, Argentina has some very valuable cards, but the Philippines does have significant ways to counter them, right?
Yeah.
Harrison Jones is going to knock down the Medivh and draw likely 3 cards immediately for the Philippines, which will fill their hand size to immediately be larger than Argentina's. And then, well, you're looking at, okay, a copy of Ice Block. That is fine. Volcanic Potion, not great in the late game. Arcane Explosion, also not going to do much, whereas the Paladin's prospects just get better as time goes on.
Okay, so they are able to identify that as, in fact, just a counterspell. So losing a Consecration is realistically not the end of the world there. There might be more important spells, a Spike Ridge Steed, for example, that you want to make sure you get value on. The Consecration, in a lot of matchups, very powerful. In this one, at least from what they've seen thus far, not going to be backbreaking. And I was just going to say, if you thought maybe that was Ice Block, I didn't dislike the Spike Ridge Steed there just because you're putting more pressure on the board. The Mage just has to get through and just expel resources into. And that's generally what you kind of want to do. If the Mage is just allowed to spend all of their burn on you, even if you have Ragnaros, even if you have Forbidden Healing, things certainly can be dicey.
Yeah.
But if you're able to kind of mitigate that burn onto your board, onto your minions, then it certainly becomes a more realistic proposal to kind of outlast.
And if you do land the Steed and see, a Polymorph in response, then that's a Polymorph that doesn't hit your Tyrion later on. But regardless, this Harrison Jones tech is going to pay off in spades for the Philippines as the really important key card to Argentina is neutralized. This is the only way that this mage deck builds up a significant board presence in the mid to late game, because they just don't have any other mid to late game minions in the deck. You have Firelands Portal, which gives you a couple of 5-drops, and then you have Alexstrasza at the end, and that is it. You're really relying on Atiyesh combined with Firelands Portal, Flame Strike, Meteor to build you up minions that you can close out the game with.
It is pretty much that line to win the game in this style of matchup, or you just say, okay, well, I'm going to pretty much just get something out of the Primordial Glyph that allows me to win. All right, so Equality, have to think that Harrison is coming down, though. Yeah. So now just Medivh 100% neutralized. Sinalguidon is none too pleased about that, and the fact that he just jammed it out on 7 with the coin, it just spoke to what I mentioned earlier, which is understanding that he had to get going.
The sooner you play the card, the less chance your opponent has to draw any counters that they may have in the deck, because likely if they're running weapon removal, it is 1 card out of 30, maybe. It's very rare that we're seeing 2 counters to weapon classes in a single deck. So you want to get it out as early as possible and just hope
well,
that
unless
your
you're
opponent
Stan
doesn't have
Sifka,
it.
then you're running like 3 uses.
Fair enough, but
yeah.
it's got a lot of potassium going on there.
The rest of the world certainly does not see the lines that Stan Sifka does, but
Fair enough.
if that Atiyesh had been allowed to stick, and the Philippines looked like they were at least debating that play for a while, then there would have been some great value coming out for Nulguidon. Had the Firelands Portal, had the Blizzard, had the Meteor, so a lot of different ways that turn could have gone down. Now he's just kind of in a spot where, you know, if this was turn 9 and he could Firelands Portal to Harrison, ping off the Equality Defend Creeper, then okay, he's got the board back. He's gotten rid of everything. Like, at least he can start asserting his agenda again. But this is just kind of an awkward situation for him now.
He needs to find a way to make use out of the less useful cards in his hand, right? And then he needs to figure out what's his game plan now. Medivh, gone. You got absolutely no use out of it. It was killed by an Equality, and Harrison was, you know, great for your opponent and has put you even further behind on resources. So now are we going for burn? You know your opponent is a controlling paladin. Maybe they have heal in their deck. Are we going to try to make use of the minions from Firelands Portal? Then you really need to plan out what the next coming turns are going to be.
Yeah, it really does have to start piecing that together. Now, we haven't really seen, obviously, because of the flexibility of this class, what the top end looks like. There could be double Pyroblast. Alexstrasza would be a big help, but he's going to need to just go ahead and get to that point, and it is a fixed number, right? That's the thing. Primordial Glyph complicates the math, but there is just a fixed amount of damage that Nulguidon in this mage deck can pump out, whereas if the board goes unaddressed, the minions that Chalk and the rest of the gang are putting down can just, over time, do a fair amount of work, and that damage is continuous, right? It's not just printed on a spell, a fixed number of damage.
Yeah, well, we did see 1 glyph already from Argentina, which netted the Kabbalist Tome. So there is an additional glyph in the deck which can get, you know, an additional Pyroblast or an additional Kabbalist Tome, which can get multiple burn cards potentially. So the fixed number of burn is still kind of questionable right now about exactly what the reach from Argentina will be moving forward. Alexstrasza is going to be the catalyst to actually put that plan in motion. However, if you don't get Alexstrasza, no amount of burn that you have is going to be enough.
So question for you there. Chalk went ahead and played down that Spike Ridge Steed and then attacked.
Yes.
So then they obviously saw his Ice Barrier. Do you think, having seen 1 counterspell, do you think you would have tested for potentially the second counterspell, or are you just saying, okay, if the Spike Ridge Steed gets counterspelled, I still feel like I'm okay because of where I am in the game?
I think you still feel all right because you do have second Spike Ridged in hand. Second copy of Consecration isn't going to be too useful, but you do need to make significant strides as far as board presence right now. Your opponent has sort of wavered a little bit. You took down Medivh. You're in a position to push. And if the Spike Ridge Steed lands there, then that is significant.
Yeah, it certainly is. And see here, it looks like Primordial Drake going to come down, and then I would assume a Hero Power follows it up, unless they just want to go ahead and use a Hydrologist to fish for something. But I don't think there's anything at this point that requires a Hydrologist to come down. You don't have the Tyrion just yet, so you're not really looking for that getaway code or that redemption. It's just better to get more value over time with the Hero Power than to commit resources.
Especially since you have a copy of Tarim in hand, copy of Stonehill, which could be an additional copy of Tarim. So all of these 1/1s can be surprise damage moving forward if you do get a couple of them to stick.
That is one of the things that's truly terrifying about this slower style of Paladin, is that it still has Tarim.
Yeah.
And Tarim takes any slow style and just says, okay, did you put 6 minions on the board? Is it just hero powers? That's fine. That's 18 damage, right? Just go. So it's certainly something that Nalguidan is going to have to respect throughout the rest of this game, because I don't think there's been a single version of Paladin I've seen since Ungoro that does not have... Somewhere Eadric the Pure is going, why not me? Why not me? And obviously we know the answer why it's not him, but...
poor guy. He was too good for this meta.
Yeah. Okay, so went ahead and played around the Repentance there by playing down that Mana Worm, and going to get rewarded. It's a minor thing, but it's certainly... I like what Argentina is doing in terms of committing to the basic fundaments of testing for these things. That
is important, because there is only a few Paladin spells, and you're mostly going to be seeing Getaway Kodo, Redemption, Noble Sacrifice in a lot of cases. But you have the liberty to play around these cards. You might as well. There are only so many of them to play around, whereas with mage spells, things can get a little bit crazy if they've been generated. You never know what you may find, which is why I think going for the Spike Ridge Steed there for the Philippines was just worth it, even though it may have been a little bit risky. But for Argentina, there really is no reason not to play around these secrets at this point.
And it's the mark of consistent behavior, and it's why you see people always where they are, right? And why they have consistent results is they're always testing for things like that and making sure that, yeah, it's easy to win when a game just always goes your way, but there are situations where if you don't test, you can get punished. Tyrion, though, coming down, and there's that getaway Kodo we talked about off the Hydrologist. It's not equipped just yet, so Nalguidan has time to get rid of the Tyrion, but what can he realistically do at this point?
So does he have a method of actually clearing the Tyrion off this turn? And ideally, he would be playing Harrison Jones at the same time.
He can absolutely get rid of the Tyrion, but the problem becomes the finite number of resources he has, which is what we mentioned earlier. If you as the Paladin can get the Mage to just invest the resources into your board, you feel great.
So if Nalguidan were to trade the Mana Worm in, for instance, double Frostbolt and then Harrison, yes, you get rid of Ashbringer. Tyrion doesn't have a chance to get Getaway Kodo'd, and you draw 3 cards, but now you've lost 2 Frostbolts. So there's the drawback, right? So you've punished your opponent, but you've also punished yourself in the process, and you really need to work towards that win condition of Alexstrasza into burn. So what's more important right now? Making sure that Tyrion doesn't get a little bit of value, or potentially sacrificing your own game plan?
Okay, so goes ahead and takes the Meteor there. One thing I would have considered is the line of potentially Arcane Explosion, Frostbolt, Blizzard. There would have allowed him to get through the Tyrion using the Mana Worm. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. Okay, so he isolates the Tyrion there, takes the Meteor, so he feels like, okay, I've got the Meteor that can deal with the Tyrion. And now he's just kind of hoping that secret is not Getaway Kodo. Redemption is okay.
That's fine.
Getaway Kodo is really the thing you don't want to see.
I'm interested to see how the Philippines chooses to play this Getaway Kodo. Are they going to add additional resources on the board? Are they going to hero power this turn, for instance? Or are they really going to try to isolate that Tyrion to force Argentina to give them an additional copy of it?
So everything they have on the board right now, if it comes back from Getaway Kodo, is actually just money.
It's very good. It's value. It's additional resources.
I'll go down just doing the blink, blink, blink.
He remains stoic. You would never know looking at him that he was in a little bit of a tough spot. But that is only if Philippines doesn't have healing in the deck and if Argentina doesn't draw Alexstrasza, right? So if Argentina can draw Alexstrasza and put together the burn and Philippines can't counter it, then Argentina is still in a pretty secure spot.
All right, gonna go ahead and get the bad news, though, that it is Getaway Kodo. Yeah. Oh, I do want to point out they have 17 damage worth of burn in their hand, and they're gonna go ahead now to the point you were making, use that Harrison, get that draw, see if they can find the Alexstrasza. There it is. They're gonna be looking for Pyroblast.
Yes. Yeah, Polymorph doesn't hurt either. You just saw an additional copy of Tyrion to the hand. Polymorph can neutralize your opponent's turn and allow you to develop on the same turn. The issue being you can't Polymorph and Alexstrasza at the same time, and you would like to Alexstrasza and then immediately get that burn train rolling. So the most that Argentina could do on a single turn, they have Fireball, Double Frostbolt, and a Hero Power right now. Yeah. So a bit shy of the 15 that Alexstrasza will put Philippines' health at. but they're getting close. Okay, now Fireball,
They have
Double
20
Frostbolt, Medivh's Valet.
Yeah, not on one turn. Now, they don't know that Philippines has no healing right now.
Well, but... Okay, so Alex the face for Philippines, and then you have Fireball, Double Frostbolt, Medivh's Valet, 6, 12, 15. That is potentially 2-turn lethal right there. But are they assuming that, Philippines has maybe a Forbidden Healing in hand?
Well, I think there's a point where you kind of realize, at least I would think, that the situation is only going to get worse.
Yeah.
That you kind of just have to, as soon as humanly possible, just go. But we see there that Argentina recognizes that there's an opportunity to just go ahead and get value and then keep pushing damage from the board. Maybe Alexstrasza doesn't have to be used here, so I actually really like this. Getting the continuous damage opportunity. You've seen one Consecration get wasted. You've seen an Equality that came onto your Medivh. So
this is consistent damage. This is repetitive damage, which is going to be important if you think that your opponent could potentially have healing spells in their deck.
Double Crawler, by the way, that really just speaks to what Philippines are afraid of. The one style of deck that beats this particular control paladin. And, we see pirates in Bloodlust Shaman, but I think it's just Bloodlust Shaman. You see it in Quest Rogue, which this deck is not going to be Quest Rogue.
No. And then, Pirate Warrior, obviously.
Pirate Warrior is what it's targeting, though. That's interesting to me, because generally Crawler is the sort of tech that you see one of, unless it's in Hunter. Because Hunter can afford to run 2 copies of a 3 beast.
So it looks like they've got 2 Crawlers, Harrison Jones, Rallying Blade. Are some of the maybe non-traditional choices for this Paladin deck. We haven't seen any N'Zoth activators, no Death Rattles, so no reason to believe that this deck goes over.
Yeah, it just looks like it's a little bit heavier.
Yeah.
Okay, so Spikeridge Steed going to be committed just because they don't want to take the damage. They would have taken 7 damage on board that they know of, and they really want to make sure this Doomsayer sticks. They've seen a Polymorph come out, and generally in this style of Mage deck, you're only seeing one Polymorph, so this is now an interesting point for Argentina. They are not going to invest resources to deal with the Doomsayer. Do you just Alexstrasza and just say, okay, we're going?
So Philippines wants to reset the board. They want to deny the 7 damage, but more important than that, they want first development going into the next turn. If Argentina Alex is here, then we know that Philippines doesn't have a response right now that would... Well, actually, Argentina gave up the Medivh's Valet, so they wouldn't have the 2-turn push from Alex and Bird right now.
But
it would have to be 3 turns.
But the nice thing is that they're actually not facing down board pressure, really.
Yes.
They're going to be facing down a Stegodon alone, which is actually... I mean, we've seen games where Alexstrasza doesn't get dealt with, and Alexstrasza actually just gets through. You put a Fireball into the Stegodon.
Alex the face. There's 2 additional damage.
I definitely don't mind that. Yeah, obviously it's going to take a leap of faith from Argentina to say we don't think there's healing, but look, 9 cards left for the Philippines. If you let them get through there, you can only assume there's going to be more healing. We'll see what they choose to do, though. Yeah, it looks like they're just going to continue to take it slow.
Be a little bit more conservative.
Yeah.
I understand why they're doing it, and I think it's fine. All things considered, they don't know what to expect from the Philippines deck, but it is a very conservative play. It's taking things very slowly against a deck that thrives on taking things slowly.
I mean, you've seen... I think there were maybe some warning bells that went off before, but when you see the Doomsayer, it definitely just ices what type of Paladin deck it is. Okay, so just committing here to making a big board, putting down a big 4-8 again. You're not seeing Leroy in this style of Mage deck, so you're not necessarily expecting anything to come off a charge that also is comboed with like a Fireball, say, to get through the Stegodon, but it's a big, beefy minion. And now Nelgadon in Argentina just sitting in the spot again where it's like, okay, now there's a little bit more pressure on the board. We still don't have enough damage to close this out just yet.
They do have...
I mean, they're sitting on 17
active.
damage right now in spells.
Yeah, 17 in spells. They've got block active, so they can live for several turns still. So I don't think dying immediately is their concern. But how slowly do they want to take this, right? They could elect to continue drawing and trying to find Pyroblast. Or they could just decide to go and try to win the game in 3 turns.
So one thing they're looking at is they have 4 cards left, and they may be thinking, okay, we're going to get to our Pyroblast, we suspect, in the terms of setting up damage here. We can weave in pings.
Okay, I see what they're doing. Argentina is trying to threaten lethal in the hopes that if Philippines has healing, they will use it now, and then Argentina can Alexstrasza and push at that point. So it is a little bit of a fake out from them, but it is really great use of their resources because they know that if they expend Alexstrasza and then Philippines heals, they don't have the burn simply to beat it.
Right.
So they need that Alexstrasza to come out after the healing, which means they need to expend some of their resources. So while they can't kill the Philippines right now from the burn in hand, there's got to be a Pyroblast in deck, so they know it is possible.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the old style you would see Freeze Mage versus Reno Lock.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It pretty
You
much
gotta force
exactly
the
that.
Reno.
Yep. Which is fine, and it's certainly something, I guess, to me, it doesn't feel like it necessarily plays against Ragnaros Lightlord that well, but I think it does play better around Forbidden Healing.
Yeah. And lay on hands if there is a copy of that, which is possible. I mean, not this is super likely.
Based on what you've seen, though, this would be the style of deck that would run a copy of Lay on Hands. Right, so the True Silver Champion going to be equipped, unable to swing, but it does give Nulguidon a little bit more information about what sort of healing they are looking at, so
Argentina with 10 damage.
Fireball does it.
There we go.
Yep. Yeah, they realized they had enough burn in hand to ice out the game, to burn out the game, and they were going to draw into it, so didn't even need to use Alexstrasza there.
Just a really fantastic use of the resources from Argentina, taking things very slowly, knowing that even though their Medivh plan was derailed quite quickly, they do have plan B, which is just better than the Medivh plan. It feels like the Medivh gets countered so often that that's just like the distraction. And then you actually come in and burn them out, which is what the real goal of the Mage deck is ultimately. And you have so many different ways to do it that even a Paladin deck that seems with healing to be very, well pitted against the Mage, like it has a decent chance. Without that healing, there's just nothing that you can really do.
Yeah, and that said, Philippines had 7 cards left and never came into any of the healing spells. And with that style of deck where they cut the early game Murloc pressure.
Yeah, kind of assuming that there is something in the deck, that there's at least a copy of Forbidden Healing. But then you think they had 2 Galaka Crawlers. They had Harrison Jones. They had Rallying Blade. So there were some other choices that you start to think, what did they decide to exclude from their deck?
Right.
Maybe it was some additional healing cards.
All right, well, that's going to do game 1. Let's go ahead and take a look at game number 2. Going to be the old Shaman Mirror. Iltimi taking on Karakute. Now, as we've kind of labored over, Bloodlust Shaman right now is what the kids are calling the nuts. It's just all over the place.
It is spicy.
Yeah,
Got me from rank 10 to rank 2 in like a day and a half. Yeah. It was a good time.
Yeah, it's a very powerful deck. It gets on the board, threatens with the Bloodlust. You just have to constantly keep clearing, or else the Bloodlust is going to win the game. So, very powerful. Now, that said, I do want to call out last week on the Europe broadcast that I was doing with Falcone, we did actually see some teams try to mix it up. I want to say we saw Hot Form from Canada bringing the Jade Echo Shaman. We saw Singapore, as is Singapore's hallmark at this point, bringing ridiculous stuff. They actually brought an elemental style shaman.
Sequinox.
Sequinox, if you're out there, you're beautiful. Keep making these decks. We did not get a chance to see what was very deep into that deck because they just got run over.
Yeah.
The moral of the story ended up being, though, over, what was it, 11 series? No, it was 9 series in that particular week. Bloodlust Shaman just so much more consistent. Yeah, it might be that you find kind of a pocket style that you want to play, but Bloodlust Shaman right now is the style of Shaman deck that is winning games.
Well, you might be able to ice out Bloodlust Shaman with even like a more controlling Shaman deck on the ladder and attempt to target that way. When you're looking at a 9-class format and you need to sort of weigh your options and think what is going to be the most consistent across the board, Bloodlust Shaman is just going to get the job done more often than any more controlling form of Shaman in a competitive format.
Yeah, very curious to see if they are going to go ahead and just go with these Bloodlust Shamans because, we've talked about what does it take to get to stage 3? What does it take to come in here and make your mark on the Hearthstone Global Games? For some teams, that has thus far been willingness to iterate and be creative, but, there is a real value to sticking to the established norm, playing it better than your opponents and just getting the wins there and kind of sticking to convention.
Yeah, absolutely. You have players that are very much believers in statistics, believers in what is the most consistent deck, what can I do to maximize my odds and maximize my percentage to win this series. And it's worked out very well for a lot of the teams, whereas, teams like Singapore and players like Sequinox have brought some more off-the-wall things, and it's worked for them as well. So you have sort of the battle between convention and ingenuity, but here it does look like convention is going to win out, and we're going to see Bloodlust Shaman Mirror. I love Bloodlust Shaman because it's very reminiscent for me of, and everybody's going to hate me for this, Secret Paladin days, right? Because of all the blowout that you can have from large early board states. If you're playing Quartermaster, for instance, then you can just win the game unexpectedly. And every little board state is threatening to your opponent. Bloodlust Shaman is very similar. You have a board of totems and a Firefly, and then suddenly you're dead.
It is certainly, something where you have to really respect the early board, and you can't let your opponent go too wide, and you have to be constantly doing Bloodlust math. Now, I want to put out on the mulligan, Ildami has the Firefly, and he has the Flame Tongue Totem. In the mirror, that is extremely important. Ooh. The ability to put down a 1-drop and then boost it with Flame Tongue Totem to get rid of something like a Primal Fin Totem can just be something that is absolutely backbreaking right from the get-go. So that is all important to have that natural 1-drop and then have that Flame Tongue Totem.
But also important for the Philippines is that they do have the Jade Claws in the opener, which counters the early Firefly, helps you to build up some small board. You get your Jade train rolling, which the Jades can simply outvalue in the late game. You have enough of the Jade mechanic for it to do some work. But, Rob, your psychic powers are kicking in, and it is going to be a significant punish here with the Flame Tongue Totem, going to kill off that Primal Fin, which is an absolute workhorse in this deck.
Now, the good news is that Philippines have their own Flame Tongue Totem, so they're going to be able to back up that Murloc and get rid of their opponent's Flame Tongue Totem, and then there's just going to be this weird war going on between the Flame Tongue Totems, because, as we saw, Argentina had both essentially in the opener. Okay, just going to go ahead and equip that, and actually that just works out, frankly, better because it plays around the potential for a second Flame Tongue.
A little bit weak to Maelstrom Portal, but Maelstrom Portal can get a lot more value than this in the late game with a Wrath of Air Totem, can clear off most of what the Shaman is working with, and then would like to Bloodlust towards turns 5 and 6.
That is something in the early going of this game specifically. You kind of have to have this checklist of things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of deciding what you play around. Now, if you play around the second Flame Tongue Totem in the opening, you are really thinking your opponent kind of got fortunate in a way that you were not expecting, because you've already seen one Flame Tongue Totem, so odds of second one being there are not that high. But they do go ahead and play around it pretty well. And Argentina's had a strong opening early curve there. They had that Firefly on 1. They had the Flame Tongue Totem. Now they have that Stonehill Defender.
It is important to note that this matchup is going to be a battle of the board early on, and if you are the first player to build up a large board state, there's not much that your opponent can really do to fight back and to really clear off that board state. These decks aren't traditionally running Lightning Storm. So you do have Devolve and you have Maelstrom Portal. Those are going to be the only AoE effects in the deck. And then single target, you have Jade Lightning. But the majority of the combat is going to be done via your minions on the board. So if you can just put pressure out very early on and you don't run into a Devolve, say, or a spell damage Maelstrom Portal, oftentimes you can just steamroll and win very quickly.
Yeah, Devolve certainly at its most valuable. When you are facing down a board of 1 and 2 mana minions, there just comes a point, especially once Doppelganger or Doppelgangster comes out, where suddenly Evolve is like, okay, well, I took them from being 6 drops back to 5 drops, and now they're still pretty decent stats. Maelstrom Portal not pulling a lot of the load there. Looks like Philippines is considering just putting down the Flame Tongue Totem, hitting the Stonehill Defender with the weapon as well. So they'll be forced to commit 2 different sources of damage to deal with the Stonehill Defender body.
It's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit unfortunate, but
it is very awkward.
Yeah, they're hoping that their Flame Tongue will live, and then they'll be able to protect it, but there's not a whole lot going on in the hand of the Philippines. They would need to land that Mana Tide Totem and really start drawing some cards to build up the card quality in their hand, whereas Argentina has a lot more to work with, more minions specifically that they can use to dictate trades.
Yeah, they could put down the Flame Tongue Totem, deal with the opposing Flame Tongue Totem, put down the Flame Elemental, and then go for the Evolve if they wanted to. So this is a situation in this match, particularly where when you use the Evolve, it is kind of a fluid topic. There is no set static answer. It's not a situation where you say, okay, Alex draws at a 15, hurl your burn. You have to really be kind of like idly looking over the state of the board and thinking, okay, if I evolve my minions now, can my opponents deal with this? It is early, but that was certainly something they could have done.
But especially because if you had Flame Tongued and Flame Elemental, you would have ended up with a 4-drop from a 1/1 Stonehill Defender, which is incredible value. Obviously, a 1/4 as a 3-drop is very weak stats. Your 4-drop is going to be much, much better than that. You're already ahead on board, and you saw that your opponent had a pretty weak turn 3. So I like this. I like that they're going for it, and they get hugely rewarded. Cornered Sentry for a 2-drop is fantastic. The Fandral stats are quite nice. This is going to be very tough for Philippines to deal with.
That is, Doomsayer obviously being the worst case scenario on a 2-drop.
Yeah.
Cornered Sentry is basically right there with Millhouse Manastorm. I think it's actually just better for this particular matchup.
Yeah.
A 2/6 with Taunt, that is huge.
So Devolve coming out here would be significant.
Right.
But unfortunately for the Philippines, they don't have it, and Maelstrom Portal just won't get the job done. So their options are quite limited. They can Jade Lightning the Sentry, run in the Jade Claws, but everything that they do will get easily countered by what is remaining on the board.
Yeah, the stats Ildami got there, I gotta be honest, those are pretty favorable in general, even at just a 3/5.
Yeah.
That was a 1/1 Stonehill Defender. That had already taken value.
I mean, there are some bad 4-drops in the game. You could have had Faceless Shambler. As far as 2-drops go, you could have, like we said, had Doomsayer, but instead you got a 2/3 and a 2/6. This was a pretty favorable evolve roll. But then for every time you have this, you evolve your doppelgangsters and you get big-time Racketeer. So
it also depends
there's
on
a lot of
piloted Shredder Karma from back in the day. How many Doomsayers you got off that?
How many Millhouses did you get? Okay, now you get a Doomsayer.
Yeah, it's a complicated mathematic equation.
We can't know what goes on in Blizzard headquarters.
I mean, I know.
That's true, you work there.
It's a lot of Ben Brode laughing.
That sounds lovely.
It actually, I'm sad I don't sit in the same building as Ben anymore, because you used to be able to detect which side of the building Ben was on based on the
And then
laugh,
you could, hide the fact that you were playing Overwatch instead of doing Hearthstone work.
It was actually the scene from Jurassic Park where they're in the Jeeps and the cup, the water.
Yeah.
And then it's just usually the ha, 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 ha. But anyway, on the board, combat happening, and as you said, Ildami is just able to dictate all the trades. He has the board. He's basically saying to the Philippines, okay, it's time for you all to do something. And now he's going to be able to play the 3-mana thing from below. So big board here, and if he has a Bloodlust, he's pushing, threatening big damage.
To add insult to injury, the Healing Totem is going to heal that Fandral back up, make it even more resilient. So Philippines can't even begin to think about pushing their own agenda until they have cleared off Argentina's board, and they have simply no way to do it. Alakir can be great for ending games as the Shaman, but
Staz's face, it just
that point.
Pretty accurately sums up the face you make when your opponent gets that roll from the Evolve.
Yeah. I feel like it's, that kid who just looks unamused on picture day. He's wearing his pajamas and he's got that face.
Why did my mom buy this for me?
Yes.
Yeah. All right,
that's it.
Philippines tries to go ahead and just piece together a board, but this is a board that is going to be very easily dealt with, and Argentina can just continue to build if they want. Infested Tauren is interesting because it's a 4-drop that's a 2/3 and obviously predicated more towards value. But if devolved, you're probably actually just getting better stats on the norm for that. So I actually kind of don't mind Infested Tauren here.
I'm trying to think how much damage Argentina have maximum. I believe it's 15 through the Stonehill Defender. So they're getting close.
Yeah, there's going to be a point where no Bloodlust is required.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's actually, I think, coming sooner than Philippines would like.
Yeah, I think it's going to be next turn.
That Healing Totem just undoes the Stonehill Defender's damage so well.
It is so good. I can't tell you the amount of games I've played over the last several days where you just Firefly Flame Elemental early on, kill other 1/1s on your opponent's board, whether it be Pirate Warrior, whether it be Shaman, and then Healing Totem and heal them back up, and suddenly they're just out of reach as a 1/2. It just spirals the game so efficiently.
Well, there's the Doppelgangster, but not going to be doing much of anything at all. There's no evolve, and even if they did, it might not matter.
Wrath of Air Totem here. Maelstrom could take out the right 4 minions, but there would still be 10 left on the board that you couldn't deal with.
I mean, you have to Maelstrom Portal here.
Regardless.
Yeah.
But what are you hoping for at this point? You're going to play Thing from Below behind it. You could land Goldshire Footman. Shield Bearer, I think, would actually be better just because it blocks more damage. Or
Tentacle of N'Zoth, I guess you'd hope for off of it.
The Stubborn Snail. Stubborn Gastropod. The snail that cannot be moved. Nope, they're going to go with the Manatide Totem. I actually like this because they know that they can't win with what's in their hand, so they need to find better options. If they live through to the next turn, that Manatide's going to be the most likely way that they get to that point.
Yeah, realizing that using the Maelstrom Portal, getting rid of the 2 minions. Now, if that had been a spell-boosted mana or Maelstrom Portal, then the situation's different. You're clearing 4 minions with it as opposed to 2. But yeah, I like what you said there. They realized that what they need to do is draw a win condition.
I think I see lethal. 4 in, then you run everything in. Jade Claws and Patches will be an additional 3. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 17, 20. They've got it.
You found the lines.
I found the lines, Rob.
This is exactly like that picture. I just saw your eyes glaze over, and then like the map appeared in front of you.
Where's the shovel hidden in this picture?
It's one of those things where pictures, where if you stare at it long enough, it becomes lethal.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Yeah, but as you said, this game was won pretty early on for Argentina. They got the board, they got the favorable evolve, and they never really had to do much else. It was just the onus was on the Philippines to continuously try and get back on the board. They were never able to, and that was a pretty easy game for Argentina.
It's unfortunate, but that can be a very divisive game. Very early on, you can sort of just tell from opening hands who's going to have the advantage. And like I said, the first person to get the board usually is going to win, just because it's so difficult to actually take the board state back without, Lightning Storm in your deck, for instance, or any other efficient cards. Devolve Maelstrom Portal can only get you so far so fast.
Right.
And
there's a window where
you
it
need
stops.
to have them. Yes, exactly. So going into game number 3, this is going to be match point for Argentina. And it's going to be a Priest mirror. That's really interesting. So Snail and Waning Moon both coupled the Druid and the Priest together. Druid is a control killer. If you're bringing Jade Druid, maybe the Priests are teched a little bit against aggressive decks. Could be possible. Interesting to see why those two are put together.
I definitely want to ask in the interview there. Priest is just so widespread in how it can be played.
It can do so much.
I think Dragon Priest right now, if I remember correctly, is technically favored by percentage points
against
the Jade Druid. So it's obviously lost some of the punch it had pre-set rotation. The curve is not as strong, but I guess maybe that's the reason if you're expecting Dragon Priest.
Yeah, if you're bringing a more mid-range oriented Priest, then you do have the edge against Jade Druid, and you still have cards like Potion of Madness and Shadow Word Pain if it is an aggro Druid that can help you get through the early game, and then Dragon Fire to help you win in the late game. You do have some reload in the form of healing there, so the Priest does just seem like a well-rounded archetype right now. It can just do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Druid there would have been bad. Maybe you don't want to go into a Jade Druid mirror. Maybe Jade Druid versus Aggro Druid isn't the best matchup.
And now at this point, we're falling down into the hypothetical rabbit hole there. But
whatever way you look at it, Priest's good, Druid's good. They both happen to go with Priest. That's good.
Yeah, Priest right now, to your point, there's so many different ways you can play it. There's that Miracle style, the Silence Heavy style, Dragon Priest. I've been playing a lot of Kazakus Priest again, and honestly, Kazakus Priest, if you don't run into Quest Rogue, Quest Rogue, suddenly the situation, looks bad if you're against Quest Rogue, but Kazakus Priest, depending on the style of tech cards you're bringing, we've seen Sequinox again, and I feel like we keep mentioning him, but he brought that, it's a deck that has a lot of power spikes with the various tech cards, so...
It is important to note, Silence Priest absolutely destroys non-Silence Priests and Jade Druid. That's the reason that you bring Silence Priest, because it beats up on Jade Druid, because they have no single target removal, and it kills other priests because a lot of your minions have 4 attack, and they simply can't deal with it before they're just dead. So maybe if you brought Silence Priest, and you saw Priest and Druid on your opponent's side, you would be, celebrating, because that's fantastic. But here it does look like we're going to be seeing combo Priests, but honestly, this could be just about anything.
Yeah, it's to the point where when I say Priest opening hand, unless it has Twilight Drake in it or Primordial Drake, I just go,
yeah, unless it has,
I don't know.
see, here's Purify. So
Okay.
this is going to be a Silence Priest for Philippines.
Yeah, Silence Priest has some incredibly powerful minions against Priest. Minions that have 4 attack that are just very difficult to deal with.
You can just land a Humongous Razor Leaf or an Ancient Watcher, silence, Divine Spirit, and your opponent can't remove it.
I think this is the same Priest we saw from Argentina last week when they were playing against South Korea. The Silence Priest in this deck that they're playing definitely differ. There's certainly more removal options in Argentina's deck. Again, that Holy Nova is there, which is not necessarily something we always see. Okay, Dirty Rat. Now I'm thinking.
Interesting. Well, we definitely saw combo pieces in both of these builds. In Silence Priest, of course, you run combo pieces. It makes sense because that's your win condition is to silence a minion with a high amount of health, Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, and win the game that way. From Snail's side, this could also be a Silence Priest build, and we just haven't seen any of the Silence mechanics yet because Tark Reaper has a high amount of health, is a defensive card, and Silence Priest can have issues in the early game against aggressive decks. Dirty Rat, also high amount of health, very defensive.
Do you just jam that Dirty Rat? Do you just go?
Ooh, I mean, you do have... There are places where you get very punished here. If your opponent's playing dragons and you pull out Ysera or even just Draconid Operative here, you're going to be in a tough spot. But if your opponent's playing a similar deck to yours, you could be very rewarded.
It's one of my favorite turns in Hearthstone.
Turn 2
Every
Dirty
class,
Rat.
turn 2 Dirty Rat. You sit down and you think, okay, what are all the worst case scenarios? And against certain decks, you have more information.
Yeah.
But against the Priest, there's just a wide delta of all the unfortunate things it could be. And I think that's going to be enough to make you hold the Dirty Rat. But
it's like against Rogue, you're like, okay, I have 1/1s or I have Edwin. Dirty Rat on 2.
Well,
Against
Priest, you can have Auctioneer.
That's true. That's true. You can get very punished in that matchup as well.
It's important to read the mulligans, too. How many cards were capped? Because generally the cards that are going to be capped are usually the cheaper cards or the cards that are very much just absolutely required for the matchup to win. So you can kind of snipe a lot of those. But, yeah, go ahead and... that came down to the wire in terms of where we're going to see that Dirty Rat or, there was the potential for coin, Tar Creeper.
Yeah. You know what? Rightfully so. There's a lot of decision-making, even just on turn 2. And Argentina elected to play the Cleric, did not Power Word Shield, playing around Shadow Word Pain there. But going into turn 3, they can hit, heal, shield. They have Talon Priest as an option. There's a lot of intricacies within just these first couple of turns. And the most important thing against Silent Priest, their win condition is strictly put down a minion, buff it up, hit you in the face.
Right.
Deal 40 damage at one time. That's the way they win the game. So, as the opponent of a Silence Priest, you need to keep them off the board at all costs. The second they develop 1 or 2 minions on board that you can't deal with, you're likely going to lose. They have Shadow Visions, they have draw mechanics, they have methods of finding those combo pieces very quickly. So I like the Shadow Word Pain.
The Acolyte of Pain certainly told Argentina more than they knew in terms of what this deck was. And in a way that allows them to kind of go along the game plan you just had, which is I have to keep the board clear. There's also Potion of Madness they need to be wary of. Potion of Madness can be the catalyst that can lead to their downfall. Something small they have gets stolen, gets buffed, kills them. So those are basically the 2 major things you have to watch around with this deck, as well as the unfortunate reality of later on in the game, maybe a Humongous Razor Leaf or an Ancient Watcher just sticks, gets silenced, and just begins bullying you off the board.
I mean, that's going to be the issue, right? Because 4-attack minions have been the bane of Priest's existence since the beginning of time. And once Azure Drake rotates out, well, then you have 3 mana 4/8s to deal with, and you still have no real way to clear them off the board other than minion combat. And Dragonfire Potion later on, but if they're at 16 health by then, you can't do anything.
A lot of these styles of Silence Priest decks aren't necessarily running, niceties like Shadow Word Pain. They're not running Dragonfire Potion. They're much more committed to the density of their own win condition in their deck. So if Argentina can get a deck going, can get a board going, and I already got a deck going, then get a board going, though,
There's a deck.
and just build something oppressive, then, it looks like from what we saw in the opening hand, they were at least running Divine Spirit. So they can put something together and just kind of win by virtue of playing the more curve-oriented game.
Yeah.
Whereas Waning Moon and the Philippines are obviously looking to do something pretty crazy.
Yeah, Silence Priest is one of the most, I guess, one of the purest forms of combo decks that we have left, since most of the combo mechanics are out of the game now. And that is going to require significant amounts of draw, right? You need to put all of these pieces together, and if you get these pieces and all of these requirements are met, then you probably just win the game. But to get to that point, cards like Acolyte of Pain and Northshire Cleric are incredibly valuable. So that was why the Shadow Word Pain very early on, getting rid of that Acolyte of Pain, denying lots of value for your opponent, even though you haven't been developing too much up to this point, is very, very strong.
I mean, it is strong, but look at that. There's a 3/8 on the board that you actually can't deal with. And I don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, well, look, why'd you do that, stupid? But it is a situation where those premium removal tools in this matchup, you really have to be looking at them and going, okay, how bad does it hurt me if I don't have this? Yeah, denying card draw, always good. That is certainly, especially against combo decks, right? They require specific pieces. They have to get to those. But leaving that 3/8 up on the board is, A, they can't deal with it, and B, it just sets up for potentially something bigger down the road. Now, they also have other problems on this board.
Well, Argentina does have the option to just pull the reset button. They can run the Talon Priest into the Tar Creeper and then coin out Dragonfire Potion, which will clear everything. It leaves a 1/1 Northshire Cleric on the board. And you really need this board gone.
Yep. Yeah, this frankly is just really big for Argentina. The ability that this board was big and it was healthy, but they had the tools to just, I should say tool rather, and then the board state to accompany it to actually deal with it because, there was a situation where this deck doesn't run a lot of minions. It actually just doesn't have that many, but they had a good amount of them in the early going, and they were actually pressuring with that board. They had the silence on deck for the Ancient Watcher, so now they're actually just sitting there with no minions.
Now they've got 2 copies of Purify and nothing to purify. Potion Heal can hopefully draw them something else, but you are also just making your opponent's minion healthier and is going back to them at the end of the turn.
Yeah, the only consolation you can take is that Northshire Cleric's card drawn days are over.
Oof. It is all washed up. And you would, obviously the basics of Hearthstone is you have to kill your opponent at some point, but by
you can also just die. That's also a thing.
That's true. Either way the game ends. But ideally, Argentina looking to win this match, they will have to push at some point, but by choking out your opponent's resources, you're sort of winning the game inadvertently, right? Because there is no real method for a Silence Priest to deal lethal damage outside of their Silence plan. Yes, they have Lyra often, and they can, hit the panic button, Lyra, Radiant Elemental, get a bunch of random spells in hand, and maybe put together something from that. But their plan A cannot happen if they don't have minions.
I like the Lyra play there, too. They realize Shadow Word Pain probably not in the deck for Philippines, so if anything's going to stop it, it's just going to have to be a copy of Silence. If they're getting ready to copy a Silence, oh well, no big deal. You have a 3/5 on the board that can still pressure, and you have forced them to use a tool to at least stop you from generating more resources. Now, I talked earlier about the Potion of Madness plan. They've seen one Potion of Madness. There could be a second one in there, and that Northshire Cleric will be a liability as long as it's up, depending on how the Shadow Visions go.
Crystalline Oracle in the deck as well.
We can say we see the dual copies of Tar Creeper, though, so we know this isn't Kazakus.
It's not a Kazakus Priest. Interesting. Have you seen anything
I want to say
like this?
they brought this deck last week. But that was when we were on vacation, and TJ and Kevin Hobbs.
Neither of us were here. We are horribly ill-prepared for this.
I watched some of the match. I just don't remember seeing the Crystalline Oracle until the cosplay did.
I tuned in, and then I was like, oh, it's TJ. Oh, I like him so much more than us. Oh, I should turn this off.
Bad for your self-esteem, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. He sits in
He
the
is
office
just too
now
good at what he does.
to walk by and see that beautiful smile of his. Lights up my day. All right, well, the Forbidden Heal or Forbidden Shaping coming out. It's Don Honcho.
Using Trade Prince Gallywix's music. I'll never forgive him.
Yeah. Don Honcho, is certainly kind of the poster child for why grimy goons never really had their day.
Oh, the poor goons.
Okay, so this is okay.
This is go
big.
time.
Yeah, you don't interfere here. That's all important. You're basically saying they can't deal
Yeah.
with a 420 minion.
It is lit, Rob.
420 Buffett. And they are going to do exactly that next turn if it survives. Obviously, Snail can chip away a little bit at the health, but...
You know what? I don't think you're chipping away at the health. I think you're putting up a wall, and you are going to deny all entry to this humongous Razor Leaf.
Ah, that is a great pick by the Dirty Rat. That Faceless Shambler he's so tiny. He's so
He's
fragile.
very small.
He's a small
He's very little.
Shambler.
Faceless Shambler Jr.
Yeah, to your point, if Snail just puts up enough walls and they just kind of beat him down, then this Razor Leaf, he's gonna rampage, but it's not gonna do much.
He's going to have, he could have 20/20 vision, but you can't see the lethal if you can't get through the taunt minions.
Well, I mean, this plant doesn't even have eyes.
That we see. We're getting a rather, upward-facing shot. He has teeth.
Does have teeth. All right, we went ahead and took that 420, made it a 410. Much more reasonable.
I can't help but think that Snail was maybe expecting to draw cards there. But the Northshire Cleric was purified savagely by Philippines earlier on.
She used to be a hero. Now she's just a 1/3.
You know what? I just can't get used to that. Those are shoulder pads and not arms. So.
Yeah, you never played World of Warcraft, did you?
No.
Yeah, there's always a big thing about the shoulder pads in World of Warcraft being about 8 sizes too big. Don't know who they were for. It's like the original Xbox controller, right? Like, whose hands were these meant for?
Like, who designed this armor? It's so unrealistic. Well, that's every game, so.
All right, second Interfire here doesn't really do much for the Philippines. Shadow Visions would allow them to basically get another 2-mana go at finding something, but Potion of Madness can be potentially pretty big if they think they can just get through that wall.
Yeah, you can Potion of Madness the Dirty Rat, and then just Divine Spirit, Interfire, and Lethal, but they are going to be a few points shy of that right now. This is 24.
Yep. They push a lot of damage here, but then that wall's going right back if they do it that way.
If you go for this... No, you can't. You can't, because then it gets immediately deathed.
Yeah.
And Argentina just heals up from there.
Doing 24 damage at that point was essentially the same as doing 0 damage. Yeah. No Mind Blast coming out here.
You've used both Divine Spirits, so you can't Shadow Visions for additional Divine Spirits.
And Snail at this point has the full measure of Philippines' deck and what they're trying to do. Just go ahead and put down more walls, and you basically just play around the potential for Potion of Madness shenanigans. Mm-hmm. And I think if Argentina was really paying attention, I have no doubt they were, they kind of realized that turn was winding down, and the Philippines was considering doing something on 2 mana.
So what could they
off of
possibly
a card from Shadow
do?
Visions, yeah.
So you can get a very good read on what 2 of the 3 cards in Philippines' hand are, which means you need to play another taunt.
It's not obvious what Wild Pyromancer is, but I think those other 2 cards are laid pretty bare.
Then you can just push. This board will get the job done.
Just beat them up.
Is that checkmate for Philippines? They have 1 draw.
Well, Silence lets you get through 1 taunt.
Yeah, there's still 1 more taunt. And they would
That's
still
crazy.
be 4 damage shy of lethal regardless.
Yeah. It's close. It's close to being doable, but yeah.
And you know what? I said Silence Priest beats up on other priests. Normally that is the case, but that Dragonfire potion coined on turn 5 for Argentina just shredded all of the resources, minion-wise, that Philippines had, and they weren't able to rebuild quickly enough from their hand was just so dry. Can they live is going to be their next check.
I mean, they certainly get rid of a fair bit here.
They can actually just inner fire the Dirty Rat to kill Don Han Cho.
I don't think
they do have another inner fire in the deck.
I think the inner fire is just too vital, though. Can you imagine the history of Priest as a class if Shadow Word Pain could kill a minion with 4 less attack?
Oh god, it would have been a delightful reign.
Back in the day, pre-Shadow Word Death, it was just like, well...
Hearthstone King Anduin would have a brilliant history.
Druid might not even be a class.
Nope. No, if Druid of the Claw could get Shadow Word Pained, I think Hearthstone history would look very different. Our job as Hearthstorians would have been very different. All right, that's kind of funny. All right, that's really funny.
Staz, man. Staz. I like Staz. He is the salty one.
Yeah.
I know. I'm out. Bye. Staz is just gonna...
That was just, there's the nail in the coffin. You don't want to use your inner fire? Okay.
You literally just see Staz. Staz taking a walk. You know? Just...
I can understand being frustrated. You're down 0-1 in stage 2 of this tournament. You need this win.
Yeah.
And...
we're making light of it, but obviously there's all the reason in the world to be upset.
There certainly is, but not enough combo pieces left in the deck
still
for
no lethal,
Philippines to be able to put this together. Yeah.
Certainly just going to be able to push.
No, they have 10.
Yeah.
Max. Well, now they have lethal.
Yeah. They had to use the spells to get there, though. No lethal was on board, so Philippines could have thought, okay, maybe we have another turn there. But yeah, that inner fire coming out. The inner fire allowed for the Shadow Word Death. Then the inner fire allows for lethal. Yes, Nail and Argentina taking it 3-0 over the Philippines.
That was a rough series for Philippines, but Argentina looked very strong. Now sitting at a 1-1 record, making it look a little bit more likely that they'll be moving on to stage 3 of this tournament. Philippines, however, they definitely struggled in that one. That was not pretty.
Yeah, for the Philippines too. I mean, they'll have to go back and watch the video. There is still a chance.
Yes.
They could technically make it out, although getting 3-0 does not help at all. If you're going to lose and you want to have a better shot of getting out of stage 2, you realistically want to go 3-2 there.
Yeah. Game score is going to matter a lot more in stage 2 than it did in stage 1. And it already mattered more in stage 1 than I thought it would, personally. There were a couple of very close differentials between 3rd and 4th place in some of our groups in stage 1 moving to stage 2. So Philippines has a chance. I don't think that there was anything really that they did horribly incorrectly. I think that just they had some poor matchups. They had some poor draws. It just did not go in their favor any way that you really look at it. So here we can see the recap of how this series went. Nalgadon kicked it off with a mage win against the Control Paladin from Chalk. Ildami with the Bloodlust Shaman mirror took the board early and took that game very easily. And then we just saw the Priest mirror. Even though Philippines and Waning Moon's Silence Priest deck is very solid against other priests, they just didn't have the card draw in the early game. They had Argentina denied them their resources and then denied them the board that they would need to actually win that game.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at Group C standings now as we come out of stage 2, or week 2 of stage 2. Netherlands up 2-0. Argentina gets that win, goes up to 1-1. South Korea also at 1-1, and now Philippines down 0-2. So going to be a rough go for Philippines to get out of this group. One thing I want to point out in that series, game 1 and 2, I certainly think the Philippines, especially that Shaman matchup, things were rough for them. They never found the healing against the mage deck. I do want to point out they did play into Dragonfire Potion on the coin, so that might be the only thing and I'm not saying that's like a huge glaring missequencing or a misplay, but it is something when you're thinking, okay, what do we have to do to win this game? We need to stay on the board because that's how we're going to win this game. This may be something they look at and say, okay, we should do that differently. But we have an interview with Snail, who is standing by from Team Argentina. Snail, congratulations, man.
Thank you. How are you guys doing?
Oh, great,
Doing
man.
great.
We had a good time watching that series. So I want to ask you real quick, the priest deck was the same from last week, right?
No, we made some changes. This list was a little bit less greedy. We touched the priest deck list to play against aggro. So we weren't happy to know that we were facing priest with our priest deck. So yeah, that matchup ended up being kind of okay for us.
Yeah, you guys got the Dragonfire potion off the coin, and that ended up stabilizing the board for you all, which was super big. At that point, they were just a handful of spells. What were you guys thinking about after that loss to South Korea last week?
Actually, we all felt like we didn't prepare that much for that matchup against South Korea. We did prepare a lot for this week. We bashed ourselves after that loss against Korea. We felt that it wasn't RNG involved in that game. It was more like bad pickups of our lineup, bad combinations, and that kind of stuff. So happy to win this matchup, really.
Yeah, it's good to be able to take after a loss and go home and watch and think like, okay, how do we do this differently? Obviously, it paid off for you this week, but next week, the big test, Netherlands coming up. What are you guys thinking?
I don't know. We will prepare again, I guess. Switch things a little bit. We feel like we are there. We can compete with Netherlands or with any other team. So let's hope the RNG gods are in our favor.
Sure.
Absolutely. You're going up against one of the giants next week. How has it been playing in a team format for you guys and all having to work together really to get to this point in the tournament?
We are close. We're not like real life friends, but we talk to each other, and there is like a good atmosphere in the group. So that's definitely something that it's motivate us to keep going, to prepare the deck list. We come all together on TeamSpeak or Discord or whatever, and we select the lineups, the deck list, and that kind of stuff. So that's a good thing, definitely, for us.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the win. 1-1 is certainly a good score to go into week 3 with. There is definitely daylight. Anything you want to say to your fans before we let you go?
Thanks to everyone supporting. Un saludo para todos los Snakebots y para toda la gente argentina que nos hace el aguante.
Awesome.
That's it.
Thanks so much, man, and go out and celebrate. Have a great night.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Yeah, so LATAM continues its winning ways. Both them and Brazil as well. We've seen Mexico, right, just coming in here and kind of putting on a clinic in terms of just how good that region can be.
Yeah, it has been incredibly impressive to see them grow over the course of this tournament and to see how unique each individual country is and how they work together individually, but how they support each other really as a region. It's been fantastic, and I think we've been seeing that mirrored sort of with Southeast Asia as well, and it is very fitting that we're seeing South America versus Southeast Asia in both of our matches this week.